Welcome to this lesson, dear primary 6 viewer. My name is John Coker Somoding as usual, and we are going to have a continuation of from where we ended last time in the previous lesson. We introduced the East African community, and in the previous lesson we were looking at the first East African community that we said it existed from 1967 to 1977. That is for a period of 10 years, as we understood in the previous lesson. And we say that it ran and finally it collapsed, as we looked at the reasons that brought the collapse in the previous lesson. And we also started in that very lesson, to remind you, we also started discussing the revived East African community that we said that after the other first one collapsing, there was need for these African presidents in this region to revive, that we say, to bring back the other East African community. So that is where we ended in the previous lesson. We ended it when we were understanding the reasons, the revived East African community, as in the heads of state, those are the presidents and the member states of that East African community. We also looked at the countries that joined in. That is when we also discussed countries like Rwanda and Burundi and then South Sudan. So we ended our lesson knowing that the revived East African community is now having 6 countries. That is to remind you on what we discussed in the previous lesson. Now in this lesson, we are going to begin by understanding the reasons for the revival of the East African community. Here we are going to look at what reasons made these East African presidents to come up with the idea of bringing back the East African community as a common market, which used to exist. On the board, we have the reasons. Reason number 1, they revived the East African community in order to promote trade among the member states. And I remember telling you that when we talk about member states, then we are meaning the countries. Those are the countries that make up that common market. So reason number 1, they wanted to promote trade that we can call regional trade among the member states. Of which member states? We have already identified them: Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and now we also had the 3 that joined. Then 2, to create a wider market for the goods and services. To create a wider market for the goods and services. This also was another reason for the revival. Reason number 3, they wanted to promote regional cooperation. Regional cooperation, we are looking at cooperation that is unity across the region, or unity in the 6 East African communities, community countries. Then we have the 4th one, to promote free movement of both people and goods across the region. Remember when we discussed the collapse of the East African community, the first one, we say that what happened after the collapse was there was restriction of movement, meaning people could not move from one country to the other. So as a result of that, there was need to revive this community, this common market, such that people would again begin moving across communities or across countries, from one country to another. That is to promote regional movement of both goods and the people. Next is to promote industrial growth in the region, that is across the member states, and to develop transport and communication network. So these are the reasons that made these presidents to revive this East African community. Now, this East African community, of course, we are now looking at the current one. We say that we are having the organs organs that run it, organs of the revived East African community. Organ number 1, we have the summit, which is made up of the heads of state. I have always told you, when we are talking about heads of state, we are looking at the presidents. So this is the one which is made up of the heads of state, whose work is to control, as in getting the activities of the common market. Then we have the Council of Ministers that we say it's made up of the ministers of foreign affairs from every country, that is from the member countries. This one is having those ministers of foreign affairs. We have the secretariat that we say this is the one that runs the day-to-day activities of that East African community. That is for the sake of this very particular East African community. Then we also have EALA that we even understood, because this one is also in the other first one which collapsed. They also had the East African Legislative Assembly. Also we are having it here, just like these other ones. The East African Legislative Assembly, that we shall understand that legislative, this one is from legislature, which means this is the parliament of the East African community, of which the work of the parliament is to make the laws that are to govern the East African community for this particular matter. Then, apart from making the laws that run the East African community, this one is also responsible for approving the East African budget. So that is for the East African Legislative Assembly. I say this is the parliament for the East African countries. So when a question is asking you what name is given to the parliament for the East African community, then your answer is right here, the East African Legislative Assembly. The other one is what we call the Sector of Committee, which is to come up with the programs, developmental programs. Then we have the Coordinating Committee, which is to coordinate the activities of the Council. And finally, we are having the East African Court of Justice, that we write in short as EACG. And just like for the case of the other first East African community, we are also having this, whose work is to settle matters, to settle disputes that arise amongst the member states. In case one country has a misunderstanding with the other, those conflicts are settled by this, or at this level, that is the East African Court of Justice. These are organs of the revived East African community. Remember, we are looking at the revived East African community, and the one that we are talking about, which is still in existence up now. The East African community is also having its departments that run it. Departments that run the East African community. Sometimes you can call them institutions. That's why I have written here departments or institutions of the East African community, which means we are going to look at these departments. The first department we are having here, we have the Lake Victoria Basin Commission, that we write in short as LVBC, Lake Victoria Basin Commission. Then we have the Inter-University Council of East Africa, we write it as IUCEA, Inter-University Council of East Africa. And then we have the Civil Aviation Safety and Security Oversight Agency, CASOA, Civil Aviation Safety and Security Oversight Agency. We have Lake Victoria Environment Program. We have Lake Victoria Fisheries Organization. Then we have the East African Development Bank. And finally, we have the East African Posts and Telecommunication. These are the departments that are running the East African community today as we talk. Next is, we are meant to understand how does the East African community benefit member states? How does the East African community benefit member states? Of course, we need to look at the member states. We said, as we talk, the East African community is having 6 member states. So let's look at how each state is able to benefit from this common market that we have called the East African Community. So we are continuing with our discussion. We said we are looking at the benefits that these member states get because of being part or because of being members of the East African Community as a common market. So these benefits, we get them from we can get them from the reasons for the formation. What did they want? And at the end of it all, they are benefiting from it. For example, when we look at wanting to promote regional cooperation, which means that these countries are now able to have or to get market for their goods. Member countries are able to trade easily, which means they can trade with one another. Like Uganda can trade with Kenya, Uganda can trade with South Sudan, Uganda can trade with Rwanda, Rwanda can trade with Kenya, Rwanda can trade with South Sudan. All of them, one country can trade with the other easily. Then two, member countries can get what they cannot produce. Member countries can get what they cannot produce. For example, if a country cannot produce, for example, salt, but there is another country which produces salt, you will find that this country also will be able to get what it cannot produce because of this common market, because they can interact, they can trade, easily. They can trade from one another, they can exchange their goods. Then the other side we are also going to look at movement, because we are saying that members now can move from one country to another. There is free movement of members. So member states benefit from free movement of people across the region. When we talk of across the region, I have always said, I mean that one country or the citizens of one country can be able to move throughout or in the whole region, that is of the East African Community. One can move from Kenya, can go to South Sudan, can go to Rwanda, Burundi, anywhere within the region. One can leave Uganda, goes anywhere within the region. Then next is, there is also free movement. Members benefit from the free movement of the country's goods. Free movement of country's goods. It has there. There is free movement of a country's goods across the region. There is free movement of country's goods across the region, which means the goods of one country can be transported to another country freely. By so doing, that country will be able to benefit as being a member of this common market that we have called the East African Community. Then also, these people can be able to raise development. Due to trade freely, member countries develop. Member countries are able to develop. I have said, since these people can have trade, it means that they can be able to, because of the trade, they can be able to develop. These countries can be able to develop. South Sudan is dealing with Uganda, so as a result of trade, can sell their goods, Ugandans can sell their goods there, and the countries will be able to develop together. So these are among the good advantage or the good things or the benefits of a country being a member of the East African community. Today we are looking at them in general, benefits of the East African community to member states. Tomorrow the question can be asking for one. Country a question can say, which advantages does Uganda have being a member of the East African community? Or they can give you any other East African country. Give two advantages that Rwanda has because of being a member of the East African community. Do not get lost. What we are looking at are the same things. We have put all these countries. They are able to get free, goods that they cannot produce. These countries are, the members of these countries can move from one country to another. That is, they can move freely across the region. Then we have also talked of their goods can also be moving from one place to another. That is, from one country to another. Then also, they can also develop in very many ways, as in communication, transport, all that is under development. They are able to develop. So those are the benefits that a country gets because of being a member. Now, having looked at those benefits, we also need to understand that as a community, that is the East African community, there are challenges that this community can face. So we are going to address that as challenges, or we can call them problems, faced by the East African community. So we are going to have a heading, problems. I have said we can also call them challenges faced by the East African community. Like I told you, when we see EAC, this one means East African Community. Don't again get stranded and you're like, again, what is this EAC? What does it mean? It is East African Community. So let us look at what challenges can be faced by this body, by this common market, by this East African community. Challenge number one, of course, being an organization which needs to be facilitated. Sometimes the funds are not enough. So it becomes a problem. We call it shortage of funds. Remember, this is the reason that made the first East African community to collapse by 1977, as we discussed in the previous lesson. So also the East African community, much as this revived one is still in existence, we are still saying it is still lacking some funds to make everything right. Then too, there is lack of a common language. Lack of a common language. Lack of a common language. Lack of a common currency. Lack of a common currency. Then we also have the other challenge in that sometimes these member countries produce similar goods. You find Uganda produces the same goods that Rwanda can produce. Uganda produces the same goods that Kenya can produce, and we'll find that Ugandans can lack where to take theirs. You want to take your goods to Kenya, they are saying even as we have. So countries producing similar goods is a problem. Countries producing similar goods. Countries producing similar goods. That is also another challenge that is facing the East African community. Then we have poor transport and communication in these countries. Poor transport and communication. Poor transport and communication network is another problem that is affecting the development of the smooth running of this East African community. Then next we have different political ideologies. Different political ideologies. Sometimes someone can say different ideas by the heads of state. You will find that sometimes when it comes to agreeing on certain national matters or certain policies, some leaders disagree. The way one wants this organization to be run can be the way, or may not be the way the other wants it to be run. And as a result, you will find that there is disagreement. People are not moving at the same pace. And that will bring a problem to this East African community. Then we have low quality of goods produced. Low quality of goods produced by these East African countries that belong to the East African community. This simply means that the products to be sold, which are produced by these countries in the East African community, are of less value. I mean, they are of low quality. The quality is not all that high, meaning they cannot be able to bring a lot of income to that country. So it also, or to the community, it also brings a challenge to the East African community. That is low quality of the goods. These are some of the challenges that we can be discussing, or that we have seen facing the East African community as an economic grouping or a regional bloc, as we already talked about in the previous lesson. Now, having looked at these challenges, we are also going to look at how these problems can be addressed. That is, what can be the possible solutions to this, because the organization has to keep on running. So if we have identified the challenges, now what can be done such that this organization continues running without it collapsing, as for the case of the previous one. So we are going to look at the ways, solutions to problems facing the East African community. So we are going to have the solutions, and like I've always said, that these solutions, we look at the problem, then we shall be able to understand how can we overcome this problem. Now here we are having problems like shortage of funds, lack of a common language, lack of a common currency. So our solution, lack of funds, we can have, these countries can advocate for funds from the international bodies, like we have the World Bank. Then we have IMF, that is the one which supplies loans to these countries. So by getting loans from international bodies, that one can solve the problem of shortage of funds by getting loans. from international bodies. From the international bodies like the World Bank, we also have the International Monetary Fund. Then the other one is there is lack of a common language. What can be done to address this? Countries can try to come up with a common language. Then we have common currency, it's the same. Trying to come up with a common currency, that is forming a common currency. Countries producing similar goods, this one can be addressed by diversifying the economy. By diversifying the economy, meaning that some countries can be doing, or they can be producing other goods other than them making the same goods. Then promoting good governance, by promoting good governance, that is good leadership. That one can address the problem of poor leadership by the member states, and which is also attached to different political ideologies. We have the problem of poor transport and communication. That one can be, we can say, by improving, countries can improve on transport and by improving on transport and communication network in the region, that will help to address the problem of shortage of, the problem of poor transport and communication. Then we have said the issue of common language. Countries can adopt a common language. Can adopt a common language. For example, in East Africa, if one was to recommend, then one would recommend Kiswahili being the common language. So countries can adopt that as a way of solving the problem of lack of a common language. Then the one of currency, we have said countries can come up with a common currency by coming up with a common currency. By coming up with a common currency. Then the issue of poor quality of goods or low quality, countries can, we do not have space here, countries can come up with good quality of their produce. If it is agricultural produce, for example, Uganda, as we know, Uganda is an agricultural country. Ugandans can improve on their agricultural produce by employing these modern methods of farming, use of fertilizers, use of good farming methods, such that they will be able to come up with good quality yields that will be able to generate also some good money to them. That is one of the ways of solving the problems or the problems affecting the East African community. Then the issue of insecurity, you would have added it here. Insecurity as a problem. Here now we will say these countries can come up with a joint army. They can come up with a joint army by coming up with a joint army, or by forming, coming up with a joint army that is to address the problem of insecurity in the region. Now, we are going to look at how does the East African community promote regional trade? How does the East African community promote regional trade? That is what I want us to discuss as we conclude this lesson. So, we are having ways how the East African community can promote regional trade. Now, we are looking at the East African community for this case, but you will find that we also have other common markets. So, if a question is also asking for any other common market, for example, we talked about COMESA, we talked about ECOWAS, we talked about IGAD, and very many other regional groupings or common markets in Africa. If we have such a question, how does a common market promote regional trade? Of course, we are looking at trade across or within that region. One is that this regional market allows, this common market allows the free movement of goods. And when goods are freely allowed to move from one country to another, then of course, trade is possible. So, by promoting or by ensuring free movement, of goods across the region. And when I talk about the region, please, I'm meaning the East African Community region. That is having the one of the 60 countries that we already talked about. So that one can promote trade. Two, by ensuring or by allowing, it makes the movement of people, can call it free movement of people, by ensuring the free movement of people from one country to another. And this is done across the East African Community region. This is another way that this East African community promotes trade, by ensuring that member countries, the citizens of the countries, move freely without any restrictions. Meaning one can move from here, goes to buy his things anywhere he wants. Then three is by ensuring cooperation, which means people work together. People are together, meaning that if people are together, there is peace in an area, for example, then people can be able to interact and trade is possible. But if there is no cooperation, then it will mean that people cannot be able to buy from others. Instead, it will yield what we call hatred. So that is another. By ensuring peace and security by ensuring peace and security. Like I say, when these people are together, you will find that they are able to support one another. Then the other one is by widening market for goods, or creating other markets for goods. It widens by widening market for goods. Remember, when we were looking at the reasons for the revival of this East African community, we say one of the reasons was to create a wider market for goods and services. So, by creating that wider market, of course, trade will be promoted in the region. Then we have organizing trade fairs. By organizing trade fairs. That can also be another way that this common market promotes trade. Then the other one is we can have it lastly by coming up with a common currency. By coming up with a common currency, this regional body will have aided trade, coming up with a common currency. The other one can also be coming up with a common language, such that the member people or the member countries and the citizens can be able to communicate to one another freely and easily by forming or by coming up with a common language. Coming up with a common language that we said for East Africa, they can make Kiswahili to be one of them because most of the countries are already using it. It is being used in Kenya, it's being used in Tanzania, and also in Uganda. Some people can speak it very well. So they can come up with a common language, and when this one is done, then it will mean that it will ease communication of these traders, and by so doing, this regional grouping will have helped to aid trade or to make trade possible. For now, we have come to the end of our discussion. I remain John Kokasomoding, and I will want you to continue watching this lesson. In case you don't understand it, or if you forget what you have understood in the lesson, you can again click it after that time and keep on updating your brain. Remember, this is the content that you need in the primary 6 class because you are supposed to use it even when you go to primary 7. Like I said before, it is what we set or what is set in the primary 7 class. So it's very, very important that you get to know these things in this class such that when you go to the next class, it will be a walkover. Thank you. Be blessed.